My name is Joyce Nzovu, Program Manager at the British Council here in Kenya. And at the British Council, I run various projects across our creative economy and culture connect strands, where then I got to interact with both Marigat Gold and Trio Media. And I'll share a bit about that as we go on.
I am Silvia Tonui, and I'm the co-founder of both Marigat Gold and Trio Media. And we have been the delivery partners for Creative DNA since its inception in 2019. Maybe if you could tell us a bit why the British Council decided to get into the fashion space, specifically Creative DNA and the business incubation.
So the British Council pretty much works out of data. So it was data-based. So prior to the project beginning, there was a research that was taking place across different African countries, basically across SSA. And for Kenya, it had the potential for fashion, looking at it as a creative industry that will create jobs, create opportunities for young people, and also the growth potential was huge for Kenya, and as well as Ethiopia. So Creative DNA ended up being a pilot project in Kenya at the beginning, working with different partners, because at the same time, the British Council was just transitioning to working through partners. And for Kenya, the first iteration happened, and Marigat Gold also happened around the same time. So coming into the second iteration, from lessons learned from the first one, having multiple partners to work with, multi-layered, it was agreed that then it would be better to work through one partner who's stationed in Kenya. Marigat Gold got the bid. It was very competitive, and they got the bid, and they introduced us also to a new level, because then implementing the second cohort, it was not just about project work. It then came out being, okay, how do we visualize this project? Then the relationship with Marigat Gold and Trio Media came to be, because from that iteration, thanks to Silvia, she opened up a new world. She opened up a new world for us, because it was more about, okay, you want to do the fashion program. There's the capacity building bit. Yes, great. Then there's the granting bit. Yes, great. Then there's the showcase. But then how do you show somebody who's not at the showcase that the showcase actually happened? So this is where then the tag into Trio Media comes in. And I feel like the initial part was more of supporting the project. It wasn't necessarily accounted for by the British Council saying, oh, you have to document this in this way. But it was more of Sylvia realizing, wait, to showcase this well for the transition of the projects to future phases and to see the value of it visually, then we have to do a good job on this one. And that ended up being, 3 more iterations? two more iterations, and then we are hoping for one more. And again, just an amazing showcase of everything that we've been able to do together.
Fantastic. So I remember a friend of mine sending me the link, because I'd worked in fashion for a couple of years. I had just as a background, I started in marketing for Elle magazine, which was a fashion magazine in South Africa. And then when I moved back to Kenya, I worked for Festival for African Fashion and Arts with Anne McCreth. And I remember we used to have weekly, we used to call them focus group discussions at the Kiko Romeo store at Yaya Center. And we would bring in young designers. We initially started, I think there was 5 of us. By the 10th fashion focus meeting, I think we had close to 40 fashion designers, and literally every single time, if you ask the fashion designers what are the challenges, of course, number one, like any entrepreneur, people say cash flow. But mostly, secondly, they were like, we are doing business we're not even doing business actually. We're running our fashion careers as hobbies. So there was a huge skills gap. So I feel like it was literally an answered prayer when British Council came up with Creative DNA. So somebody sent me the link, and then I applied, and it was in support. I remember the first year, the first iteration was with Meta. It was a really wonderful, it was a wonderful collaboration. And I remember working with partners like Daisy Chesang, Esther, and Ida. And when we took over, just as Kanzi, you've mentioned, we felt like it was really important to document, because, people say if a tree falls in the forest, it really falls. So are we really doing a good job if we're not documenting it and doing really strong storytelling. So I think that what you've said is really important. And have you seen? Of course, we've worked very closely with the fashion designers. I think now over the 4 iterations, we've now worked with 71. Yeah, 71 fashion. Top of your mind, have you interacted with fashion designers where you felt like this business training has really impacted their business?
Yes, definitely. And for me, 2 stand out. One of them being Epica. But I have never seen somebody push that hard for things. That girl can push and she will apply to everything. The interesting thing is, when I first met her, she was under the Creative DNA program, but I was working for a whole different organization.
Wow.
So I met her in another 1 day, half a day sort of fashion designers training thing. And she had the same drive and she spoke about the program. I had never heard about the program then. So I also was curious about, okay,
this was before you joined the British Council?
This was before I joined the British Council. So
I'm glad people knew about Creative DNA even outside of the program.
Because I joined at iteration 3, actually.
Yes.
So when one was happening, I came across her and she was talking about a program she was in because she's the first cohort. But years later, by the time I was joining number 3, I was like, she was a whole other person. For her, it wasn't just about improving her product, but it was also about improving her personality.
Wow.
The way she presented her business was different. The way she understood her business was different. The confidence in her business was different. So I was like, what? Is this the same person I met before the program? And now she's gone through this program and she's envisioning something different. And she applies for funding away from Creative DNA. Got the funding, still a British Council funding, but completely different. It was now just about telling a story and developing a new project. So it wasn't necessarily a fashion funding, but it was related to, fashion, but still it wasn't the Creative DNA one. And she was able to achieve more than most. Like she went out.
Yes.
His studio stands out as well because you tend to see her in spaces of academics as well, and in spaces of fashion. So it's like she creates a balance of my fashion needs to also educate, and I love it for her. So those 2 are my standout. But definitely all of them, you get to, African New Vies out there thriving, and you get to see different things going on. But those 2, exemplary.
Yeah.
Exemplary.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned those 2. And I think in the spirit of storytelling, I feel like, because Trio Media was a storytelling partner for Creative DNA, and I feel like how they crafted their stories was really phenomenal. I remember cohort 1, just like you, when I met Sharon from Epica Jewelry, and I'll give a shout out there on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and their website is at Epica Jewelry. And I remember that she was doing beadwork very similar to Masai Market.
Yeah.
No shade to Masai Market, but there's very little product differentiation. If you go to Masai Market, one stall is very similar to the next. And I remember, Creative DNA, unlike other programs I've seen, was very different in the way that the delivery partners work. So we were put in partnership with a UK-based fashion company called Fashion Scout, and they also helped to build the curriculum. And a lot of the designers were very inward-looking and not quite understanding the international market. So Fashion Scout was a really important partner because they came in with a really strong curriculum of how to brand your products for the international market. And I think the best case study would be Epica Jewelry because, as I mentioned, when she came in, she was doing beadwork very similar to Masai Market, and she completely did a 180-ton. And now if you see her jewelry, it is so different. It is so unique. It is stunning. And I feel like that can be partly attributed to her drive, but also that partnership that we did with Fashion Scout, because they literally, number one thing was that they kept repeating over and over again is you need to be unique. And our other curriculum partner is the founder of Kiko Romeo, Anne McCreth, and she had a very strong class on finding your unique brand DNA, because all of us have something inside. Sometimes we forget, or we try and conform to what we see around us. But then, I feel like Epica Jewelry is such a great case study of how, yes, maybe you have this really unique idea, but then you're being held back by fear. But then I feel like creative DNA really, more than anything, really give these designers confidence to be like, you know what, almost some sort of validation that your product is good enough, you can be unique, and you can outsell everybody. Because from cohort 1, we had Epica Jewelry, and we also had We Are NBO, who are also doing jewelry, and now they're part of the Canex programs, and they're showing, I think currently they're in Tranoï, in Paris. Wow. And it's all about getting that very strong foundation that they got from Creative DNA. And Hisi Studio as well, that you mentioned. As you said, besides the intersection of creativity and academia, she's also very strong on inclusion, because she works with Braille on her fabrics, so that blind people. So she does very strong messaging on her clothes using Braille, and visually impaired people are able to feel and touch, because sometimes we find that fashion can be very visual. So it was very special and very unique of her to include touch as well, in her fabrics. So yeah. But then, what do you feel really stood out, made us stand out apart from other partners?
Your dedication to the work. Let's start there. Your dedication to the work, and
shout out to Wendy as well.
Yes, shout
and
out
the
to
production
Wendy
team
and production team. And we, as an organization, the British Council has its rules and regulations and procedures and requirements. And you didn't come in blind, right? You came in with an interest tool to understand those dynamics. So working with a partner is often a bit tough, because you're trying to guide them towards what the organization expects. But in your case, you are embracing what the organization expects. So it wasn't just about, the British Council wants me to deliver this. It was also being ready and willing to understand the British Council wants me to deliver this, but how do they work as well? So that then when I'm delivering, it still aligns. Yeah. So then all the checks, and as the years have gone by, processes have changed along the way.
A lot.
Processes have changed, but every time we would say, okay, I'm requesting for a unique meeting where we are just talking about process. You are open to that. And that's important, because then at the end, during the process of the delivery of the project, it becomes easier. It was just, at some point, it was just an exchange. And there was so much trust that our finance team also got into that trust. Us being able to merge budget systems, merge financial reporting things, and merge all these different things, and understand what do they expect from us, from the project manager, myself sitting at British Council, and you sitting on the other end. How do we merge these two and still align to all the requirements needed? This was magical, because people can deliver fantastic things anywhere, and anyone can do this. There are amazing project managers around Kenya delivering amazing projects, but it's very, very difficult to align with an organization that has as many regulations as the British Council does. But you were able to come in, sit back and say, okay, what are these expectations for the projects, but also how do you guys work? And that made it so easy amidst the challenges, amidst changing systems, which sometimes cause delays, which sometimes cause problems. We were still able to find solutions together at every point. And sometimes even when we're stuck, I'm just like, okay, hi Silvia, hi Wendy, I need something from your end. And some of these requests are not even direct to the program, but they are in support of the program, and it was always, let's see what we can do. We will find a solution towards this thing. So that process made it easy for all of us to just work through, settle in, understand everything. Because even me, from my perspective, I came to learn a lot about your organization, understanding, oh, wait, there's Marigat Gold. This is what they're doing. There's Chio Media. This is what they're doing. And what does Chio Media do more? And you're like, okay, we're on the podcast, we're on this, on this, on this. And then discovering that it goes beyond us, Many other podcasts are recording out of the studio. And you're just like, now I'm learning. Now I'm also being part of this community that was created out of Creative DNA.
Yeah.
And magazines, I'm requesting for magazines, and I'm learning about structure, and I'm printing the wrong one, and I'm being told no. And coming back and just also learning and getting new skills myself it's easy. The work is a lot, but a lot can be made easy when you have a partner who understands what's happening.
Thank you very much for that feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to circle back, you mentioned that some of the Creative DNA fashion designers have gone on to apply for other grants or other programs still under the British Council. Do you mind mentioning what that is? What sort of grants does the British Council, also what sorts of programs can creative economy players tap into under the British Council? Okay,
so I'll start with showcases, because those become sort of a low-hanging fruit, especially for fashion designers specifically. But I feel like some of them either don't have the confidence to apply for these things, or feel it's a process. But most people feel it's a process before they even open the form. So for creative economy, the one low-hanging fruit is the showcases, because automatically you have your product. What you're applying for is an opportunity to go and sell your product and showcase it. So that's easy, low-hanging. Then you transition into some that are a bit tougher, like you can find, for instance, in the case of Sharon, her participating in London Fashion Week. She applied for a showcase opportunity, but then ended up having a follow-on fund. So those are not usually solidly at the beginning. It's like, oh, it's a showcase. And then maybe after they've done the showcase and there's some money, the project has some money, and they're like, oh, let's throw it out to the designers to compete for each to do something. So it's a follow-on on that based on post-assessment of budgets of a thing. And you're like, this was meant to do this, let it still serve that community of people. So then doing that follow-on fund becomes another easy thing, because you're able to use a grant to implement something. Then there are connecting grants, which then are open to more than the fashion designers, because some of these festivals that people go to end up being multi-sector festivals. If there's one that touches on you, check it out, apply, look at it. Nothing is difficult until you open it. Yes, most of the advertisements look like they have too many words, but that's because we need you to understand what you're applying for. So it will have all the detail from this is what is required, da, 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 da. Once you understand the detail, you open that form, it's probably 10 questions. 10 questions that you can easily answer and easily compete to understand. Because last year also, but this was mainly focused on the Creative DNA because they're part of the cohort. So also being part of the cohort gives you another level of perks. So there's things that will be open outside of the cohort. But then the things that are only open to the cohorts themselves, because they've gone through the training, they're at another level. Which means if I call upon a designer from the Creative DNA cohorts to showcase at Senegal for something, it's different. It's not the same. It's not like somebody who's coming in fresh. But there's also in-country opportunities that I think people don't take. You take the cohort to Treble Chic, and there are very many other designers there. So even beyond the cohort, I think this is something other designers can tap into, but most don't. It's like there's a fear of applying for things, and it's a Kenyan fear. Even me, I have it sometimes. I'm just like, do I look like I qualify for that thing? So that sense of fear needs to kind of be stripped out of us for us to be able to see we can fit into any opportunity. And I've learned so much about fashion that I've learned it's a whole value chain. Like there's one of the fashion designers, what's his name? I keep forgetting names, but I know the guy. He trains tailors himself, right? He went to Senegal What's that?
Um,
Gentile.
Sam
Yes,
Omindo.
Sam Omido from Gentile. So when they started the work, he was just using, tailors, any tailors, but then you want the quality of your work to be at a certain level. So which means you have to train them yourself.
Yeah.
So he goes in, he's working with some guys from Kibra, but he is training them himself for the quality of work he needs. But then this creates new opportunities. When they're not being used by Sam, other people are buying stuff from them, right? So they design, they do your work, but they've polished their skill. They've polished their skill to be able to deliver better quality for the market. So I feel like it's a whole value chain thing. Sharon went to train women, in our village, beaders. She learned from the beaders, understood better how to also make beads, but she also told them, listen, you can explore beyond what you know.
Exactly. And improve on your craft.
So this kind of exchange that seems to happen also has indirect value.
Yeah.
The value that we are not assessing, but you can see it happen.
Yeah.
Where people are now replicating, creating jobs, looking at the value chain, buying better fabric, buying things and understanding each other and buying things together.
Yes.
And using spaces together to sell out of. So it's just all around an amazing experience to just be part of the project anyway.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's not a one-way relationship. I'd have to say that even as Trio Media, as Marigat Gold, we've really grown. You mentioned international showcasing. We hadn't really gotten into that space until we signed on the Creative DNA project, and I'll just have to mention to the audience that myself and Kanze worked very closely on a very huge international exhibition in Cairo last year, October, for 10 days when we did the Canex fashion showcase. And of course, because we are a small company, sometimes we are not able to fly everybody. But inshallah, very soon, hopefully, we'll be able to take the entire team on. But then, I just have to say a major thank you and a shout out for all the support, because, I was the only company representative managing an exhibition of over 20 fashion designers in a really huge space in Cairo. And thank you so much for really being a team leader, not just a client, but then it's been a pleasure working with the British Council, because I won't mention other clients, but then just how the entire organization is very involved in the projects, because sometimes you work with some partners who are like, here, run with it, deliver a project, and are very far removed from the daily activities of the project. But then I feel like British Council, as with project management practice, we've had weekly catch-ups, just so that if there's a risk, we flag it quite early. And so just going back to the international showcasing, we have to be really thankful for the British Council, because now we can proudly say that we are able to do international showcases, not just in Nairobi, but in other places, because we did Canex in Cairo with Afrexim Bank. And then the second one was the So Creative Summit in Johannesburg, same thing. And we haven't only worked with Kenyan fashion designers, we've done open calls and worked with fashion designers all across Africa, like both for Canex and So Creative Summit in Johannesburg. We worked with Kenyan designers, Ethiopian designers, Ugandan, Ghanaian, Nigerian. So yeah, it's been a really wonderful opportunity, and I feel like Creative DNA is the gift that keeps on giving, because initially I signed a 1-year contract, and then I feel like it's really carried us through and helped us expand even internally within our organization. Because besides just project management, we've been doing the storytelling. Shout out to the production team for producing really amazing stories, both in podcasts, YouTube videos. So actually you can go online and learn more about the individual designers, because we actually have a podcast for creative DNA fashion designers. And yeah, it's been really amazing. And just as we wind up, what plans do you have for Creative DNA?
Well. Well, we wanted to grow. We wanted to look into sort of a value chain direction because it's been looking at fashion designers, which is amazing, and it has been great. But then also looking at if I transition to a different county, maybe I may not find as many fashion designers as I find in the main cities, Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu. Main cities might have them. But how do you transition this into something that can support also people who support these designers to help them see the full vision and see the growth? So currently there's a lot of plans happening behind the scenes, so we won't be able to necessarily speak on them at this point in time, but there's plans to just go into the next cohort and move from Nairobi to beyond.
And sorry to jump in. I'm glad you guys listened because we usually do an open call for fashion designers, and I think with the first cohort we really struggled. I think did we get even more than 30 applicants? It was very hard. We literally had to call individual designers and say, look, there's a program, and then believe it or not, we have over 300 applicants by the fourth cohort. And the number one question that Wendy and I keep getting asked, why is it only Nairobi based? Why is it only Nairobi based? I'm from here. So I think cohort 2 and 3, because of COVID, and it was online, we were able to include some fashion designers from Kakuma refugee camp, which was really fantastic. Nice. But then for cohort 1 and 4, which were physical business incubation classes, we had to have the people based in Nairobi, so that became a challenge. But then that has been the question constantly: when are you expanding it to other counties?
But I think that's a finance question more than it is us wanting, yes. Because the want is there. You know there are people out there who can do amazing work because you see it, you know it. And some people, if a designer can tell you, I went to get my stuff, I get our tailor in Kisumu or somewhere, you're just like, okay, there must be an essence of fashion happening there, but there's the financial element where we're just like, okay, how do we get there? So you know how expensive the program is, but it's expensive with value. But able to have a full experience and able to say, yes, I did the capacity building, I did that, I did this. But for that to happen, and even the tours that you get to do, so for that to happen in that full element, then we could only do it in Nairobi. But we are applying for funding, and we roped in Marigat Gold on this as well. And we hope this will allow us to stretch our wings a bit. Because sometimes one organization has limited resources, and your neighbor has a bit more that you can borrow. So you go into your neighbor and you start applying, and you're like, this is amazing. This is something that will be exploring and growing millions of youth. So why not try and explore it with us? And your neighbor says, okay, let me look into this and let's do this together. So that's the step we are in. That's why we are trying to transition into the next phase, but differently. And we are hoping this funding will help us. And we don't want to stop there. So we are hoping this will be the first one to make people see we are trying to move out of the city and hopefully get more funders and more partners to come on board and be able to say, this makes sense. This makes sense as a growth opportunity. Let's do a bit more. So I don't think it's one of those things that ends overnight. It's one of those things that keeps growing and keeps giving, and the designers also keep giving to their communities as well. So yeah, I'd say creative DNA is growing. It's not one of those wheels that stops. It's a turning wheel that keeps going.
That's good news. And it's really important that you mentioned the value chain. And I think even different to other projects that we run as Trio Media, I feel like fashion, as you said, the value chain is so varied. With Creative DNA, we decided as part of the storytelling, actually many activities, but then some of the activities that have really involved more than just the fashion design aspect. Number one has been the access to market, the pop-up shops. And, for that, we've partnered with retail centers like African Lifestyle Hub, the Village Market, and Sarit Center. And I feel like, there's that retail aspect. So the thing I have loved about Creative DNA is that it's not just putting money in pockets of fashion designers, but then the ecosystem around it. So yeah, we've had pop-up shops where the designers are able to meet with consumers and speak about their products. And then the second one has been the Wowzine. So the Wowzine is a really brilliant project, which is storytelling through magazine format. We've done some really amazing fashion shoots in partnership with famous curators and stylists like Sunny Dollart, Iona McCrath, and in that one activity, we are working with fashion photographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, wardrobe assistants, set stylists, curators, even up to the simple our printer who actually prints the magazine. So you see, that's the thing about fashion, that there's just such a strong ecosystem around it, that if you're so it's a big thank you to the British Council, because if you're supporting fashion businesses, there's a lot that come with them. We haven't even mentioned the tailors, the people selling the fabrics, the thread, like I could go on and on and on, down to the farmer who's farming the cotton to spin the yarn, down to the weavers who spin the yarn into textile. So yeah, I feel like it's endless. And
it is endless.
yeah.
Endless.
So if we look at Creative DNA from a British Council perspective, it's not just support for the fashion designers, it's been support for an entire industry. And I think we also did research into sustainable fibers in iteration 1, and I think it's really been good in policy. We haven't seen it yet. However, we've had so many roundtable discussion with policymakers to present the findings from the sustainability report, and hopefully we'll start going back to how things were done. Slow fashion that wasn't polluting our waterways and our and filling our landfills. And so it's just a big thank you to the British Council, because you've just worked on. It's been so many moving parts of the Creative DNA. Like when I started, I was like, it's just managing fashion designers, and like no, it's actually curriculum building, speaking to 100 different stakeholders, the storytelling aspect, the policy aspect. It's like, okay, now you need to call the PS into a room, you need to call manufacturers into a room to discuss how do we move away from harmful practices, because the reality is fashion is a major pollutant. So it's just a big thank you for moving the fashion industry forward.
I'm also grateful that you were able to just bring on board different partners. It's very difficult. It's not easy to want to open the port and say, okay, I can only do up to this part. Now I'm opening up to bring somebody else on board to do another bit of this part. And just looking at how much data is there. Because pre the project, there was the research on the different sectors across sub-Saharan Africa. And then came into the market research just for Kenya to understand the markets and who can work in the markets. Then comes the sustainable fashion research. So I feel like it's been a whole bunch of information that needed to be implemented at different spaces and needed to work in those spaces. So I'm so grateful for you being also able to transition this into saying, this is what the curriculum will look like to embrace these different parts. So all those different things are important.